Did you hit start? Yeah, right. Here we go. Technology is amazing. Welcome for the second time, even though it's the first time if you're watching online. I'm super grateful to have you if you're watching online and following along. We're really grateful that you are doing that. Would really encourage you to be together in person. That's really where you're going to get the most benefit is doing it in person and studying in person and having discussion because um, as iron sharpens iron, Proverbs says. Um, so we need to be in community together. We really would appreciate your support. There's a link in the description of the video to our Tithely, which is a secure online giving. Really would appreciate you dropping by and supporting the work that we're continuing to do. We are in Genesis chapter 4, and we're going to pick up the story of Cain and Abel. And just as a way of reminder, we went through Genesis chapter 1 and the first 3 verses of Genesis chapter 2 in the first creation story. And what did we say was really the main point that God was communicating? I guess there'd really be two things, but what were the main things? Yeah, you have my, yeah. Yes.
I just want to make sure I was right before I said it in the microphone. To trust the story.
Yeah, we want to trust the story. God is different from all the other gods, and the communication is trust Him as He builds. And how do we effectively
I remember what it is.
trust?
You don't have to lead me to it. I remember.
Go ahead. How do we effectively practice trusting God?
By taking a Sabbath, by resting.
By resting. Resting is clearly a communication of trust.
For sure.
If you find yourself at a place where you can rest and just take a deep breath, you're trusting that what you have done is done and you're okay with whatever the outcome is, whatever the results are.
It's like my least favorite thing to do.
Sometimes you. Yes.
Yes.
And
True.
then the second creation story in Genesis 2 and 3, we are introduced to Adam and woman, and there's a specific thing that enters the story here. Do you remember what it is? Not the serpent. Desire.
Oh, yeah.
Desire enters the story. And when we see God's description of the fruit of the tree and the description of Eve as she sees the tree, not only is it good to eat, not only is it good for nutrition, but it's desirable for gaining knowledge. So desire enters the story and creates problems.
It was good for food. It was pleasant to the eyes.
Pleasant to the eyes and
desirable to make one wise.
So that word desire enters the story and corrupts the process of trusting. And so that's where we are. So now Adam has renamed woman Eve because she's the mother of all living things. So Adam and Eve have been driven out of the garden because of the love of God, not because of the anger of God, but God's compassion and mercy that they wouldn't live in that state forever. And we talked about that Sunday morning. Should look back at that. And two weeks ago, it was a little snowy last week and really, really cold. Not safe to be out and about. So here we are. Pick it up in Genesis 4, verse 1.
Now Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain, and said, I have acquired a man from the Lord. Then she bore again, this time his brother Abel. Now Abel was...
All right, let's pause real quick. So, a couple of things that are really interesting. And some people really... the focus of this story is Cain. Abel is really a footnote in the story, and we're going to talk about him. But some people believe and teach that this statement from Eve about Cain is like, well, it's me and God, and Adam's not in the story. And that it is because of God in it, and there's anger there. And because of a broken relationship. The Bible doesn't really tell us that, but it does tell us Cain's name. And Cain means acquired. To acquire. And so, not a term we use much. When's the last time you used the term acquire, Chelsea?
I have no idea.
So,
because we have simplified language so much. So
Sure.
I would never say I acquired that from a friend, but I would say I got that from a friend.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even say I received that.
Yeah.
Which would really be another.
Like a gift.
Yeah. I acquired it.
So tell me a little bit about, like, in the Western world, how do we deal with names? How do we name our kids?
Well, with Nicholas, we named him because I wasn't named after anybody, and I wanted someone named after me.
Yeah.
So we even spelled his name with no H after Nicole. And Decatur was a family name.
Yeah.
That I just always liked. And then with Lauren, it was a huge argument and indecision. And I say argument. I mean, we just went back and forth. We just could not settle on a name. Mm-hmm. And then Sawyer.
Well, she's named after the nurse.
Well, not after the nurse, but when I had Lauren, there was a student nurse named Sawyer that was so sweet, and I just said, "Hey, do you like your name?" And she said, "I love my name." And I thought, okay, that's a neat name to put in the thing. And then
now we have to convince everybody who doesn't know her
that she's a girl.
She's a girl. That's a girl name. Anyway.
So, and then her middle name Grace is after your mother, and so that was a family name. Mm-hmm. And then with Jonas, you said, "This child will be named after me, boy or girl, I don't care." I said, "Okay." So, Jonas Kirk.
There we go. So, tell us a little bit. How would a Hebrew family go about, especially an ancient Hebrew family, go about naming their kids?
I think a lot of times, whenever they would have the child, the name would be based on what they were going through in that moment. And it was almost as if, who am I trying to think of? Even, what does John mean? Like for John the Baptist? Or no, was it Isaac? Because he laughed.
A lot of the Jewish names, the older Jewish names, had to incorporate some form of one of the names of God.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, there are a lot of situations like when Sarah found out that she was going to have a baby, she laughed. Yeah. So I think the name Isaac means he cannot keep up with stuff tonight. That's twice.
Go ahead.
I think it means that
many of them
she laughed or whatever. If there are a lot, oftentimes they're situational to what's happening to them or to, and I don't even know how they did it, but they would.
Historically, they would say they prayed, they'd be prayerful over it, and it would be prophetic.
Right. So I was going to say.
Names had a lot of meaning.
I was going to say, I don't know how they did it, but, like with Eve, it literally means mother of all earth, which she was. She was going to bear children. That's what she was going to do at that point.
A lot of women you'll see in the Bible, especially the Old Testament, Jewish women were named, and their names would reference trees, and you're like, well, that's kind of weird, but it's because of the attributes. This one is very straight and honest, and this one is caring and is a shade tree and a place of comfort, like to be a comforter. So where we in our culture often choose a name before the child is born, in the Jewish culture, it's my understanding that on the 8th day, especially young men, on the 8th day when they're circumcised, that's when they're given their name. Because
I kind of like that thought
so
with that practice
there's a lot to that, and we're actually going to deal with that
later.
down the line about the significance of that. But
So really, they do it based on prayer and
it was meaningful.
tradition
and yes,
prophecy.
The names of God they would merge in there. But it was about a prophetic. This is who they are.
Yeah,
not just hey, this sounds really cool, or like my brother and Heidi. Happy birthday yesterday.
Well, they started the pattern.
And just
so they
carried
start with
it
the
on.
pattern, yeah.
So they have four girls and all end in Lee.
L-E-Y. And
Yeah.
they all only have 6 letters.
6 letters, yeah. So very, very cool.
Yeah. So, I mean, people do things on purpose for sure, but definitely different than the Hebrew tradition.
We have to understand that Cain is to acquire. That's what it means. And so Eve names Cain because God has allowed her to acquire it. Because of God, she has been able to inherit this. Go ahead.
Eve named him?
Yes, Eve. Yep.
And she conceived and bore Cain and said, she said,
She said, with the help of the Lord,
Cain,
I have brought forth a man.
I have acquired a man from the Lord.
Yeah. Now there is no doubt there's definitely a strain in this marriage, in this union.
I mean, I can imagine why.
I mean, can you imagine God comes to you and says, "Hey, what's going on here? You broke the rules. Hey, it's that woman." Like, first thing went wrong, and you blamed that woman you gave me. That's right.
Yeah.
That woman you gave me. Right? That definitely gives strain to the marriage. And so Cain becomes an acquirer. He becomes a farmer. And oh yeah, we're almost there. But Cain becomes an acquirer. He becomes this personification of it. So go ahead. Sorry.
So then in verse 2 it said, then she bore again, this time his brother Abel. Now Abel was a keeper of the sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. And in the process of time it came to pass that Cain brought an offering of the fruit of the ground to the Lord. Abel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and of their fat. And the Lord respected Abel and his offering, but he did not respect Cain and his offering. And Cain was very angry, and his countenance fell.
So I'm going to read that in the NIV. The Lord looked with favor on Abel and his offering, but on Cain and his offering he did not look with favor. So Cain was very angry, and his face was downcast. So right here in the story, where I guess I have a few questions. Do you have questions? I have a question. Who told him to bring a sacrifice, an offering?
I don't know. And who would tell Abel?
Go ahead. Wait.
Their parents had to bring sacrifice.
Nope.
No, they didn't.
Didn't.
They never had to.
Does not say so.
They never sacrificed in the garden.
The order of sacrifice was given in the desert between Egypt and the Promised Land.
Not true, because God had to sacrifice an animal, and he told them to go out and do like
Did God kill? No, he didn't. He didn't say go and do likewise. He hasn't. He said he killed.
You're not in chronological order, but yes, it was done.
Nope. The Lord banished him from the garden. But the Lord God made garments of skin for Adam and his wife and clothed them. And the Lord God said, the man has now become like one of us. That's chapter 3, verse 21. God has not, there's been no instruction to bring an offering to God. Now, what we do have to understand and what we're going to look at later is it was a common practice in ancient traditions to bring a sacrifice to the deity of choice that they had. But Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel are not there yet. They are the foundation of society. So, again, I'll go back to who asked for a sacrifice? Who asked for an offering?
No one.
No one. So this is a free will offering,
It
is
just
what we're
says,
getting at.
and in the process of time, it came to pass.
So they willingly chose to make an offering.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The next question I have is, in the offering that they bring, why is one preferred over the other?
I don't know.
I'm going to think it's because of the fact that they are the way that they
Based on what?
reread what is said about the offering.
So the Lord. Okay. Now Abel kept flocks and Cain worked the soil, and in the course of time, Cain brought some of the fruits of the soil as an offering to the Lord. But Abel brought fat portions from some of the firstborn of his flock. And the Lord looked with favor on Abel and his offering. But on Cain and his offering he did not look with favor. So Cain was very angry, and his face was downcast. Now, one thing that is significant about Cain and Abel, Cain is the firstborn. He's the oldest brother. And in the Jewish term, he would be called a Behor, a double portion. He would be the birthright. He would be responsible for caring for mom and dad in their old age and carrying on the traditions of the family. He would have more responsibility and more understanding and more teaching and more education. He would be responsible for a lot because he is the oldest son. He'd be considered a Behor. So there's a lot of blessing and opportunity that comes along with that. So that is a context to the story. But it's challenging to read this because we automatically look over this and we make all these reasons, but nobody told them what to sacrifice. God never asked for a sacrifice or an offering.
And to our knowledge, they brought the best of what they personally did.
That's right. And interestingly enough, Cain is bringing the best of what God provided him.
Yeah.
He is literally an acquirer. When you think of acquiring, it is not done by your own ability.
Right.
So to farm and to produce produce, you plant.
Well, because Paul watered and Apollos did something, and then
Paul planted
and Apollos watered, but God does what?
But God gives increase.
Right. God's the one who causes it to grow.
That's right.
So
here's Cain, the acquirer, acquiring, tilling the soil, working it. Remember the curse that Adam was given? You're going to work this ground, and it's going to fight against you, and it's going to be by the sweat of your brow. So he's got blood, sweat, and tears in this thing. And out of this ground produces the fruit of the seed that he put in the ground that is acquired because of the work that God has done, because of the rain that God has sent, or because of the water that God has sent, and the fertility. All of this is because of what God has done. And he chooses to bring whatever he has that God has provided to put in front of God.
But didn't God, he created the animal too.
Yeah, God did create the animal. He did create the sheep. I'm just saying.
I don't know, because it doesn't
Based
say.
on what? We haven't looked ahead yet. This is so bad. So, yeah. This is stories, right? Right. Yeah.
Well, the way that they described it in this podcast that we listened to is it's just like if you have two of your kids bring you a portrait that they've drawn. You don't love one kid less just because you like the other kid's picture better. You love both pictures, but I just happen to like this one better. And this time, this is what I liked better.
Yeah.
And whenever I heard it put that way, I thought, well, that makes sense. That this was just more pleasing to me. That doesn't mean.
And the conversation we're having right now is where our Christian theology a lot of times gets caught up. Well, and we make justifications for Abel. Well, Abel brought the best. Well, it doesn't say that. It just says that he brought the fat portion. And he brought his firstborn. Like we oftentimes in our teaching of this, we make justification and say, well, Cain didn't bring his best, but that's not true. We're not given that indication. Cain brought the best of what he had. Abel brought the best of what he had. And for some reason, God looked on Abel's with favor and not Cain's. And Cain was upset, rightfully so.
His feelings were hurt.
He has worked with his blood, sweat, and tears to cultivate this ground and fight against this ground to bring forth the best of what he had and lay it before God. And
He didn't say that God didn't like it. He
just said he didn't look on it with favor. And so now here God is responding and recognizing. So verse 6, then the Lord said to Cain, why are you angry and why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? Right. Well, I would say God's encouragement God wasn't scolding him about what he was doing wrong. He was just encouraging him. Hey, just bring me a good sacrifice. Bring me a good sacrifice tomorrow. Bring your best tomorrow. Bring your best right now. Just bring to me what is pleasing.
If you're doing what's right.
If you're doing what's right,
I'll be pleased.
It's all going to be fine. Right. And then he warns him, but if you do not do what is right, then sin is crouching at your door, and it desires to have you, but you must master it. So we don't get this picture of Cain and Abel now growing up in a world where they're separated from God. They still have a relationship with God. God still has a relationship with his people. And he is encouraging them back into a right relationship with him. He is encouraging them and drawing them back into a right relationship and to do what's right. See, this is the challenge. We in our Western culture think that we perceive sin as being pervasive from the depths of who we are. And in the Eastern world, sin is what you do. And so this is the call of God to Cain. Hey, don't go and take this anger and go and sin because of it. Because sin is crouching at your door. It is waiting for you, and you're going to have to master it. This is a matter of will, not a matter of it's a matter of desire and will, not a matter of just acting, right? Isn't this what we talked about before? The difference, what makes humans different from beasts?
The fact that we can control the desire.
We can control. We can have a desire and not act on it. We can have a need for food and not eat. Choose not to eat. Right? Other beasts don't do those things. And that's what God is calling out to Cain right here. Hey, that desire for vindication that's in you, that anger that is rising up in you, don't let it lead you down this path. And
then it goes on to say in verse 8, Now Cain said to his brother Abel, Let's go out to the field. While they were in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. Then the Lord said to Cain, Where is your brother Abel?
Okay, I want to stop right there. Where's your brother Abel? Does God know where Abel is? Oh, he is completely aware.
He's not where I left him.
He's not where I left him. It is the same term. The same term.
Same translation.
That when God comes down and Adam goes and hides, and God says, Adam, where are you? This is the same thing, the same words in the Hebrew that God says to Cain, where's your brother Abel? Your brother Abel is not where I left him. What did you do? Because God knows, right?
Yeah. I don't know, he replied. Am I my brother's keeper? The Lord said, What have you done? Listen, your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. Now you are under a curse and driven from the ground, which opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you work the ground, it will no longer yield its crops for you. You will be a restless wanderer on the earth.
That's it right there. And that's where we're going to stop. But that curse, that sounds an awful lot like what God said to Adam when he ran him out of the garden, isn't it? And so the central point of this story isn't about, well, we're sinful now and it will take us to places. Now, that can be a great lesson for us to learn. We're not beasts. We don't have to go that far. But really, it feels like we're on the same track with the same story.
Yeah.
It's like God is, again, trying to tell his people in the wilderness, hey, you've got to trust me. You got to trust me. And it sounds an awful lot like the statement that John the Baptist made. When John's disciples see Jesus growing in ministry and baptizing people and doing things, and they come to him and say, what is going to come of you if this man's ministry continues to grow? And what's John the Baptist's response? I must decrease so that he can increase. He's got to increase. This has to be more about him than it is about me. And it feels like that's the statement that God is continuing to make here. For the third story in a row, God is communicating, hey, you got to rest and trust me and not try to depend on the work of your own hand. Hey, you've got to rest and trust me and not try to find a replacement some other way besides the way that I've given you instruction to do it. Hey, you've got to trust me and not just pursue after your own desires to do it your own way. What if Cain, the one who acquires, has the ability to trust God even though he's frustrated and downcast about his offering not being looked on with favor by God? What if he's willing to trust God and not act on his own desire, but allow the next rain and the next harvest and the next sacrifice to be continually brought to God. What changes? And this is the call of God. This is the purpose of what God is doing here, because he's trying to communicate to his people who have been delivered from Egypt, hey, you got to trust me. And he's trying to paint the picture of the consequences of what it looks like to not trust. If we don't trust God, if we don't trust a loving God who's providing for us, we're going to end up breaking all the rules. Because he gives them these. I was looking back at it and thinking, first and greatest commandment is what?
To love the Lord your God with all your heart.
To love
Mind,
the Lord
soul.
your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. And that he would be first, no other gods before him. Isn't that the story of creation in Genesis chapter 1, Genesis chapter 2, Genesis chapter 3? And then the second one, Jesus says, the second command is
Love
just
your
like
neighbor
it.
as yourself.
Love your neighbor as yourself. We can celebrate when someone else is given favor and not feel like we need to take them out of the equation so that we can be favored.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really that movement of trusting God and trusting his story that we are called to. That we are called to trust the story, to trust God in his leadership, and allow him to provide, allow him to be enough. So I think that's a great place to stop, don't you?
Yeah.
So we're going to move into a time of discussion. Again, I encourage you, join us, come and be here with us at 6:30 on Wednesday evenings, or watch this with a friend and discuss it together. But we're going to move into a time of discussion here.